So let me start off with a question. Anyone from Dallas here today? Anyone from Dallas? Anyone that's grown up? Okay, good. Because a few years ago, I was in Dallas, and I walked into the store, and I got talking to a salesperson, and the salesperson asked me where I'm from. I said, I'm from Toronto. They said, where? So, okay. So on a more somber note, what happened, okay, you might remember that on the news, there's a big thing on the news back in 2018. About 4 years ago, exactly around this time, what happened was that 2 blocks north of the Dallas headquarters police station, a black man was shot, an innocent black man. He was sitting in his living room, and off-duty white officer, she had just finished her 13-hour shift. It was at 9:30, and she walked thinking that she was in her room, and she saw this black person. The door was ajar, which is very strange. The door was not locked, it was open. She walked into the room, and there was this person sitting and eating ice cream. And she had a revolver, and she shot 2 shots into his chest. He called 911, and by the time he got to hospital, he was dead. It's a big thing on the news because an off-duty white officer killed a black unarmed man for no reason. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because this officer was charged for manslaughter, and then this case was raised. There's a lot of, hue and cry about this case, about how it unrolled. But at the court, this poor black person that was killed for no particular reason, his name is Botham Jean. He's a 26-year-old accountant working for PwC. So on the day of the court hearing of this charge for this off-duty police officer, when the judge rendered her decision, the brother of this dead person, his name is Brant Jean, an 18-year-old, he asked the judge if he could go up and hug the accused. He went up and hugged this person very tightly and forgave her for her misdeeds. And what was even more surprising is after the verdict, the judge did something very unusual. She came up and hugged the mother of the murdered person and also hugged the person that was sent to prison. So why we're bringing this up? Because tonight we're going to talk about the quality of forgiveness, okay? So the quality of forgiveness is something that is very important for a devotee. Someone who's aspiring to be a devotee must imbibe the qualities of forgiveness. That's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that was mentioned in a verse in chapter 15, text 40. So in the next remaining 25 minutes, we'll go through what is forgiveness. We'll talk about some of the verses in the Gita about forgiveness, why it's important to forgive, and a few examples from the books of Srila Prabhupada about forgiveness and how forgiveness relates to the current environment of turmoil. So if you're up on Italian opera and Shakespeare's plays, you'll hear a lot about in their plays and the opera, things about vengeance, grudging, backbiting, etc. So the meaning of forgiveness, basically the best meaning that I could get is that it's a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or a group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve to be forgiven. So that's the closest definition of forgiveness. Now, according to psychologists, there are basically 3 types of forgiveness, from the highest form of forgiveness to the lowest form of forgiveness. So just to touch upon that, because I think it's important to know that this is a very complex topic, and we're not going to, give justice to it in just 25 minutes, because I was hoping to have 40 minutes because of other things, it got delayed. But anyways, the most important thing, or the most important stage of forgiveness is threefold. One is exoneration, that's free completely from blame. Number 2 is forbearance or tolerance. And the third one is release. So what do I mean by these concepts? Exoneration basically means to forgive, then forget that nothing ever happened. That means you completely, you wipe out your hard drive and start with a new slate, brand new hard drive, okay? So when does this happen? That you completely forget about someone that did some injustice onto you, and you completely forgive them as if nothing ever happened, okay? There are only 3 main scenarios. One is that if it happened accidentally. Someone is driving the snow on the road like today, and he slams into the back of your car, and you have a permanent neck whiplash, okay? You have some, you say, why did this happen, sense of that. but you forgive that person because it was an accident, you know? Next thing is in the case of a child or a minor. Children do not know, some things happen that children do some very bad things. You set a fire on a house, pick up a dad's revolver, shoot someone, or go off and drive the car, like that. Some really odd things, and you forgive that because it's a child. And the third thing is someone is repenting. They have true repentance. That is, they're absolutely sorry about what they did. That is, they'll never do that ever again, and they promise that, and they completely have full remorse in their heart, okay? That is when you would forgive them. Now, if you don't forgive them, then two things happen. One is that you will always live with that pain, and so will that person. Because if you don't forgive someone, then you'll always have that grudge in your heart. And I'm sure you've all experienced that you wanted to forgive someone, but you just couldn't release that, okay? You can release that forgiveness. And the second thing is that it's not a problem with them, it might be a problem with you. Because if you don't forgive them for something that was seemingly, unjust, but would have happened anyways, then maybe you should look inside your heart and say, what is wrong with me? Maybe I'm more wrong than the person that wronged me. So that's the quality of forbearance. Next level down is the aspect of, that's the exoneration. Next is forgiveness. So the first one is forgive, forget, as though it never happened. Forbearance means forgive or do not forget, okay? That is that the person is giving an apology, but actually it is not a genuine apology. Why? Because in part they still think that you are to blame for their actions, okay? So that is called forbearance. And the last one is called release, is that you just forgive that person and you move on. You break the relationship. So in the first two, you maintain your relationship, when the last one is you dissolve your relationship with that person. You forgive them, but you move on, okay? So that is called release. Now, let's move to the Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita has 3 key verses about the aspect of forgiveness, okay? 10.4, 16:1-3, and 9:30. So these are the key verses in the Bhagavad Gita about forgiveness. If you want to go to the back of the Bhagavad Gita, you can reference those. So in 10.4, translation is intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, and other 16, 17 qualities Lord Krishna explains. These qualities of living beings are created by mine alone. That is, forgiveness comes from the Supreme Lord. He says that I am the source of forgiveness, okay? So keep that point in mind, number 1, from 10.4 Bhagavad Gita. And in the purport, Prabhupada writes a very short line, but very emphatic line. He says that Shama, which is forgiveness, tolerance and forgiveness, should be practiced. One should forgive and excuse the minor offenses of others. That's what Prabhupada says. Moving on to 16:1-3. In there are 26 qualities, and one of the qualities is forgiveness as well. So these are called transcendental qualities, and Lord Krishna says, they belong to godly people endowed with divine nature. So forgiveness is divine, okay? As it says, to err is human, and to forgive is divine. Alexander Pope, the 18th century poet, said that. Very famous verse. To err is human, but to forgive is divine. Now, what is the most famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita about forgiveness? 9:30, right? Apichidat sutaro bhajate mam ahanya bhak sadar eva samantavya sadar eva samyaga. That is that samyaga. That is that even if one is completely and most abominable, if he is engaged in devotional service, he is considered to be saintly because he is properly situated in his determination. So it's a lengthy purport, but I'll just mention the last part is that Prabhupada says in that purport, and this is a very instructive purport, he says that therefore a person who is situated in Krishna consciousness and is engaged with determination in the process of chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, should be considered to be in the transcendental position, even if by chance or accident he's found to have fallen. So Prabhupada, be very careful with the choice of words. He says by chance or by accident, not intentional, okay? We won't talk about intentional forgiveness tonight. It's a different subject matter altogether, but we might touch upon that in brief. The word sadhu eva in the verse is that he's saintly, very emphatically, and they're warning to non-devotees that because of an accidental fall down of a devotee, one should not be derided. He should still be considered saintly, even if he has accidentally fallen down. And the word mantavya is still more emphatic. If one does not follow this rule and derides, that makes to fun of or laugh, irresponsibly, for that fall down, then one is disobeying the order of the Supreme Lord. So the Supreme Lord becomes very unhappy if you deride someone, even if they have, done something bad. So the qualification of devotee is to be unflinchingly and exclusively engaged in devotional service. So my dear friends, what are the take-home messages? We said a few things, so let's just reflect on this. What does this mean? So number one is that to forgive is divine. Why? Because Krishna says in 10.4 that this quality comes from me. So if Krishna is forgiving, then how can we not be forgiving? He's the Supreme Lord. Who are we? So if he forgives us, and we don't know how many times he forgives us during the day. I'm not talking about yourself, I'm talking about me. Committing so many offenses, it's impossible. You hear the story of Nal and Damayanti, in the Mahabharata. The Nal, he committed no offense. The demigods came to hunt him down. Who are the demigods? Two demigods, Draupadi and Kali. They came to hunt him down, but he was sinless. He was up of him. Until he did one mistake. What is that mistake that Nal did? He forgot to wash his hands after eating. Now, how many times do we do that? How many times do we actually wash our hands after eating immediately? He forgot that. And then that was the cause of his entire fall down, and that entire story is mentioned in the Mahabharata, a very nice story about the aspect of forgiveness by his wife Damayanti. But anyhow, let's move away from that. So number one is that forgiveness is divine. Number two is that Krishna says we have to forgive, okay? Why? Because we just said Krishna forgives. Every day we commit countless mistakes, unknowingly or knowingly, and there's no hope of us. If he did not forgive us, then what are our chances to go back to God? Impossible, especially in this age of Kali. I'm not talking about Satyug where everyone was sinless. So Jesus Christ taught that if you forgive others their transgressions, your heavenly Father will forgive you. He says that in Matthew. And then Peter, one of his 12 apostles, asked Jesus, he said that how often Jesus is necessary to forgive. Jesus says 71 times. He didn't actually figuratively mean, he meant that symbolically. That is, we should keep forgiving 71 times. Okay? So therefore, reminding again is that, we're all human beings. We all commit errors. If we're not committing any errors, we're, a demigod, or we're something extraordinary. We're not a human being, So therefore, it is natural for us to err, but it is even more natural for us to forgive. Why? Because as many times as we commit errors, that many times we should forgive. Okay? And the world would be a different place if we forgive others for our, unintentional sins. Okay? It'd be a better place. And we would not hold this grudge. When we hold a grudge, we carry it on for a lifetime, and it continues into future lifetimes as well. And that's why we are born with these mentalities of anger, greed, vengeance, envy, jealousy, all these things are born with us. And that's why when the baby comes out of the birth canal, it's crying, because all of a sudden it comes into this world of grief and remorse and repentance. How many people are going to backbite me? You're all being bitten by all these worms and insects in the womb, and now you're being bitten by these real things outside, like dengue and Zika virus and all these other viruses that are going around. Number three is that we should forgive and forget. Just let go, forgive and move on by assisting that person. So we should not necessarily keep any records of wrongs. That's for the other people. That's for, your manager. That's for the judge to decide, the government. The other people that will decide the verdict. Unless we are designated in position of management, then we should not take upon the position of management. We should leave it to the higher authorities. Other thing is that we should give up any claim to be compensated for the hurt or loss that we have suffered. So let the bygones be bygones. That is, if it's happened, just let it go. Let it go. Otherwise, you will burn with this fire of, vengeance. You'll be thinking of this person so much so that'll affect you both physically, mentally, and spiritually. Your spiritual life will go down. Oftentimes, when someone is hurting you, then during the time of japa, you think of that person, and your japa goes off thinking about that person's, property. What can I do to that person's property? All these things come into mind. So therefore, the mind is chachalam. Bhagavad Gita says that the mind tends to do things that we do not intend to do. Okay, the mind tends to do things, but we do not intend to do those things. Okay, so therefore, in society, when we see someone fall and commit some, failure, we should remember that in Krishna consciousness, we're not defined by our failures. Society may think that we are defined by failures. Oh, this is a man that once was a statesman, and now he's failed badly. Society will always think of the bad part, but Krishna does not look at that. Krishna, to everyone, we're his sons and daughters. Okay? So what actually defines us is not how we fall, but the fact that we do not rise from that fall. Okay? So that's the key thing. That if we do not get out of that, make a sincere attempt, then yes, okay, maybe we're a failure to ourselves. Okay? Number one. The other point is that Krishna is always ready to give you mercy. Okay? The mercy is always there. All right? So therefore, we should use Krishna's mercy to wash ourselves, but not whitewash ourselves. Okay? That is that we should pick up from where we left off, but not, some people when they do something bad, they, completely become reclusive. Then they do some other things, like they start taking, unwanted contaminants, drugs, they seek bad association and so forth. They become remorseful. And then they do some really bad things. They might even commit, suicide. But one must rise above that, Like Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, that one must rise above these calamities because these come and go. This is the material world, There's never such a time, when there was never any remorse in this world. So we have to live with these things and move on. So when we do these things, then it becomes lighter for us to move on. So therefore, the key point is that falling down is not a failure, but staying down is. Okay? So we should rise above that through good association, coming to a temple, seeking out a mentor who will help you, reading the books of Srila Prabhupada, and listening to classes on forgiveness and forgetfulness. So the Bhagavad Gita, this verse that we just read, Apichatacharo in 930 Bhagavad Gita, it's a very instructive verse. Not only for the person that's fallen, but for the other people that see that person who's fallen. Why? Because we all can be in that position. Today we might be the temple manager. Tomorrow we might be not allowed to come to a temple. That has happened. That can happen to any one of us. Why? Because Maya is very strong. Devi Isha Guna Maya, Mama Maya, Duratya. This material world, Bhagavad Gita says, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita in chapter 7:14, that this material world, this energy of the material world, is insurmountable. You cannot surmount that. He used the word impossible. Only if you hold on to Lord Krishna's lotus feet can you overcome this material energy. Otherwise, just like if you're in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, what are the chances you'll survive? Very slim. But if you have a strong lifeboat, a big boat, and people to, grab onto you, yes, their chances of survival are better. And that is what it's called Sangha. This verse of 930 is actually all about Sadhu Sangha. That is people that, we all need Sadhu Sangha because for people that have fallen, and any of us can fall, we need the tight rope of devotee association from falling into the grip of Maya, right? Like sometimes when you see, when you go to the circus, well, we don't go to circus anymore, but when we used to, we see people walking that tightrope. We're like a tightrope person. We're walking, and if you just slip, just like this world is like a sharp razor edge. If we don't pay attention while we're shaving, we can just cut ourselves. So on that tightrope, we can fall down, and that net is still there to catch us. But what if the net was not there? What is that net? That net is devotee association, the sadhu sangha. Okay, the sadhu sangha, sarva shastra hoy. That is this sadhu sangha is that thing that will protect us from fall down. And if we fall down, that thing will bring us rise up from this fall down. So that's the key of 930. Now, what do the teachers say about fall down? So let's talk about one of the teachers. His name was Gaur Govinda Swami. Now, some of you may know Gaur Govinda Swami. He passed on, went back to the spiritual world, and he talks about a story called a needle and a sieve. So all of us know what a sieve is, right? It's S-I-E-V. That's the thing that, a round circular thing that separates coarse from fine granules. Like, sometimes when you go to some villages, they have a sieve to separate the dal or the rice, from the courses. So that's called a sieve. So Gaur Govinda Swami, Gaur Govinda Maharaj says that the sieve is full of thousands of holes, but it is laughing at the needle. They say, hey needle, you have a hole in your back. But then the sieve doesn't realize how many thousands of holes. I'm like that. I say, oh, look at you, who are you? But you forget how many faults we all have, That's Gaur Govinda Maharaj saying that. And then he says, are you perfect? When he used to give classes, he was very fiery. He says that, are you perfect? This is a verbatim from Gaur Govinda Swami. If you have some defects, then why do you find fault with others? Sages don't see the bad in others, but in themselves. So that's the characteristic of a sadhu. A sadhu never looks at others, how they're faulty, but he or she looks at themselves. how am I faulty, And if you have that nature to see bad, then see what is the bad in yourself, but see the good in others. So close your eyes on bad tongues and open your eyes on the good things. And another quote is from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj, the spiritual master of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. He said that the best of all persons think themselves to be less than all others. Why should a person pry into the defects of others when he does not seek to scrutinize his own conduct? So therefore the Bible says, judge not, lest you be judged. Right? Who are we to judge? Because we will always be judged. We might look at one person, 10 people may be looking at us. Okay? So, my dear friends, let us realize that this aspect of forgiveness is something that we should all try to imbibe, and the world will be a more peaceful place. A few minutes ago, I said that one of the important qualities of a devotee, whether you're a devotee in the mission for a long time, or whoever you might be, an inspiring devotee, or anyone, the Bhagavatam says in the 9th canto. So everyone is familiar with the Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes I talk, but I forget that sometimes there might be people that might be a little new. So if the Bhagavatam, you can actually talk in someone at the bookstore or at the bookshelf outside on the hallway. What is Srimad Bhagavatam? I humbly urge any of you that are not familiar with the Bhagavatam, please go to the hallway, and some devotees will be there to tell you what is Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is your most important book in life. Without that, you cannot live life. It is the book that you all must have. Bhagavad Gita, yes, but the Bhagavatam unfolds the entire Bhagavad Gita. All the concepts that are mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita and mentioned in great degree to the Bhagavatam, and it gives you all the life lessons. If you memorize the entire Bhagavatam, not that we memorize, but if you understand the Bhagavatam, then surely, without doubt, you will reside at the Lord's feet of the Supreme Personality Godhead right there and then. So the Bhagavatam in Canto 9, chapter 15, verse 40, okay, this is mentioned in the pastime of Daksha, of Durvasa Muni, and what he did is that he committed a great offense against Ambarish Maharaj. It's a long story, but basically he committed an offense against the Vaishnava. So the verse goes as follows: Shamaya rocha lakshmir brahmeshwari yatha prabha shaminam ashu bhagavatam stasyate harir ishvara. Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada. The duty of a brahmana is to culture the quality of forgiveness, which is illuminating like the sun. The Supreme Personality Godhead Hari is pleased with those who are forgiving. Purport. Different personalities become beautiful by possessing different qualities. Janaka Pandit says that the cuckoo bird, even though very black, so if you look at a cuckoo bird generally is gray or black, and they're common in Europe, is beautiful because of a sweet voice. Similarly, a woman becomes beautiful by her chastity and faithfulness to her husband. And an ugly person becomes beautiful when he becomes a learned scholar. In the same way, Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras become beautiful by the qualities. And twice Prabhupada mentions Brahmanas are beautiful when they are forgiving. Kshatriyas when they're heroic and never retreat from battle. Vaishyas when they enrich cultural qualities and protect cows. And Shudras when they're faithful in the discharge of duties. Thus everyone becomes beautiful by special qualities, and special qualities of Brahmana, as given here is forgiveness. Therefore, when we become forgiving, we shine like the sun, illuminate like the sun, Lakshmir, like that. Rochata Lakshmir. So, and therefore, Hari Ishvara, Lord Hari becomes very pleased by the quality of forgiveness. Now, we're just short of time, but I'll just share with you two examples, okay? One is that of Maharaj Parikshit, and the other example is that of Maharaj Chitraketu. So Maharaj Parikshit, as you might know, is that he's the cause of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Maharaj Parikshit was our emperor about 5,000 years ago, and he was a very, perfect emperor, but he committed some mistake, and this mistake was simply to bring on the Bhagavatam. He was out on expedition, and he's very hungry, very thirsty, and he came up to an ashram of Shamika Rishi. And unfortunately, he did something that was totally uncharacteristic of Vaishnava. He asked the Rishi, who was in deep trance, to give him a glass of water. And the Rishi was in deep trance thinking about the Supreme Personality Godhead. So he obviously did not hear Maharaj Parikshit ask for a glass of water. When he came to his ashram, Maharaj Parikshit got upset and put a death stake around his neck. And the rishi did not know that, but the news came to his young, unintelligent, childish son, who was called, Shringi. And when Shringi heard that, he immediately cursed this great emperor, Maharaj Parikshit, for something that was so negligible and so subtle. What did he do? He did not curse him to have a snake around his neck, but he gave him something much more than he even expected. He cursed him to die in 7 days. Imagine, something as little as putting down, not saying that that was just, but he put a snake around, his father, but he cursed him to death. Is that equal or unequal? Very unequal, okay? But the amazing thing about Maharaj Parikshit is that he's the emperor of the supreme world, okay? He's Vishnu Ratha. That is, Vishnu comes solely to protect him. When this little Shringi, this childish like Shringi, gave him this curse, he did not revolt. He accepted this curse, okay? Very lovingly. Why? Because he felt that he was due for that. Why? Because inside his heart, he felt very bad. Not because he was bad that he was going to die in 7 days, but because he felt very bad that he committed such a great offense to a Vaishnava, Shamika Rishi. So a person that is very, cool-hearted like a Vaishnava is never thinking that I'm going to be dying in 7 days, but instead what worried him was much more the fact that he had insulted Shamika Rishi. Point number one. Point number two, but he did not ask for apology. Why? Because Shamika Rishi had already felt very bad that his son had cursed such a great emperor to die. Something very, 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 very bad. Similarly, in the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, Chitraketu Maharaj was also a very great devotee, very powerful devotee. He had the blessings of Shankarshan. He was a devotee of Narad Muni. So Narad Muni gave him a mantra to get the Supreme Lord in 7 days. So in 7 days plus 3 more days, he got the darshan of Shankarshan. So he came to a very high position very quickly. So with that, he became a bit prideful. And what he did is that he saw one time that Lord Shiva was sitting with Parvati, in an assembly of sages, and Lord Shiva was sitting with Parvati on his lap. Now Shiva is Mangala Mangalam. He's all auspicious, okay? He's Jatadara. He has married here. He is Sabapati, that he's the president of all the assembly of the Vaishnavas. But when Chitraketu Maharaj saw this, he was surprised. How can someone as so high as Lord Shiva have his wife in the assembly? In the private to be fine, but in the assembly of sages. So what he did, he told Lord Shiva, is this correct? And then Parvati, I'm just running this fast forward, it's mentioned in chapter 6, I think in canto 14, 15, chapter 14, 15, is that she cursed him to become a demon, And her curse for a demon was that, he'd still be a devotee. And because she cursed him as a demon, as Vratasura, he went back to Godhead immediately. When he was killed by Indra, he went back straight to the planet of Shankarshan, okay? So the point that I'm making, dear friends, is that he did not revolt at that time, okay? He's a king. Both Maharaj Parikshit and Chitraketu Maharaj could have counteracted that curse. He was more powerful, so that even Parvati Devi, he could have counteracted that curse. Maharaj Parikshit could just do that, and he could have counteract that curse. But they accepted the curse and felt very bad in their heart for that. So the point that I'm making is that the greater you are, you can also fall down, but never feel bad for anyone, because it is said that Deva Natra, that there's always a reason behind why things happen. And that's why great sages like Maharaj Parikshit and Chitraketu Maharaj could understand the reason behind this. So therefore, when we are caught in a situation like this, we should remember what they went through. All right. So we're almost out of time, but we can go on. So last of all, I'd like to say that in this world of current turmoil, that what is happening in Ukraine, what is happening in Iran, what just happened in Colorado Springs yesterday, all these things, these shootings and so forth. The thing is that if we become a little more tolerant, forbearant, forgiving, then this world would be a much happier place. We might not have had this war in Ukraine, this moral injustice in Iran and so forth, like that. So therefore, how can we relate this to the Prabhupada marathon? This marathon of Prabhupada called the Gift of Knowledge is the greatest marathon ever. It's a Boston Marathon, this marathon, that marathon. But this marathon is a marathon of life. This marathon ends all other marathons. You don't have to do any other marathon except go to this marathon called the Gift of Life. Prabhupada says that, if one does a class, like I'm doing a class, maybe there might be some people that might take some message away. But even better than doing a class is to give someone the gift of life, and that is give them a book. So I urge all of you that the one take-home message from this class is that if there's anyone that you've done wrong and you wish that you had forgiven them, then why not in this, in this book, the season of the Prabhupada Marathon, take some books with you, take a case of Bhagavad Gita, and write down all the people that you would have forgiven, and call them and give them a Bhagavad Gita during this time of giving. So that's one message that I can take in this class is take a box of Bhagavad Gitas before you get into your car tonight, and in the next 4 weeks until the marathon ends, give it to people that you would have otherwise wished you could have forgiven in a nice gift bag. HARIBOL. So with that, we'll close. Again,
Thank you, Jagannath Misra. Sorry, we had to cut that a bit short. We have a few announcements here. So today, our upcoming events are our Krishna Fun School is having their upcoming Gita contest, as well as their regular Sunday classes every Sunday from 5 to 7 for ages 3 to 17. For more information, you can visit our website, torontokrishna.com. And today's feast is cooked by Suchara Padma Devidasi and her team. There is no sponsor for today's feast. You can sponsor the feast or deity garlands every Sunday to commemorate various occasions. For more information, there's a poster at the front desk. You can also see Neetu Mataji at the front desk if you have any questions. Our next big event is Gita Jayanti, which will be upcoming on December 3rd. Our program will begin at 3:30 p.m. We will be reading the entire Bhagavad Gita. We will most likely be alternating from Sanskrit and English to get a mix of both. So we encourage everyone to join us. It'll be a really nice program, and I'm sure you are all looking forward to it, as it's been a few years since we've been able to celebrate in person. And we have one sad announcement. Our mother Subudhi, as many of you know, are one of our senior devotees and former temple president, very active in our temple. Her brother passed away. His name was Ramesh Bedi. So I just request everyone to chant the Maha Mantra together in his memory. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama. So next Sunday, we will be very fortunate to have our very own Bhakti Marg Swami here, and he'll be giving our class, so it's not to be missed. And before I have some more announcements, we have a special guest to make the rest of the announcements, but just before that, if anyone is here for the first time, we have Jessica over here who will be more than happy to answer any of your questions and take you on a brief tour of the building. So once it's time for prasadam, please come and